energy and earth sciences. Well, for most of us who work in these communities, you'll find that there's a lot of synergy amongst them, both from an environmental, an energy, a climate, and even national security perspective. So having said that, we've created a robust platform today to help tie these organizations together, both from an information standpoint as well as a collaboration standpoint for industry and government alike to coordinate. And I think that you'll really like this program. So before we get started, I'd like to say a special thank you to the Board of Directors, the Executive Advisory Council, as well as the Planning Committee. Each are included in the program, but those that couldn't make it this morning, please stand for a round of applause. This amazing program would not be possible without their hard work, dedication, and contributions to the chapter. So, everyone, round of applause. Okay, a few quick housekeeping items. You guys know the drill. Please keep your phones in the off or silent position. And I was told by Katie, who you'll see in a second, there are evaluation forms that are here. Please fill them out. We need those to create even better programs for you. And this is the shameless plug that I'll put in. We're always looking for volunteers to staff on our programs as we spin out. So if you like the program that you're here to see today and want to get more involved, please let me know or see any one of the staffers, and we'll be happy to speak to you about that. Also, there will be an open mic for questions, so if you do have a question, please raise your hand. Somebody floating around will bring you the mic to answer that. And then, most importantly to many people, there is Wi-Fi access here. So the network that you're going to get to is called Hamilton Public, and the password is Ham Events with an S. So, without further ado, let me introduce you, and it's my pleasure to introduce our Chair and VP of Programs for the chapter, Ms. Katie Keegan. Look at that.
Thank you for that glamour shot. Thank you, Guy, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. Before we get started, I do want to emphasize I would love for you to fill out this form. My job is I'm in charge of programs, and my job is to draw you guys in. So I would love to hear your feedback on how we can make adjustments for next year to make this program even better. And any other ideas, if anything that you guys want to hear about, please let me know so I can create that content for you. So before we get started, I wanted to thank my entire committee. I'm not going to go through everybody by name, but there are a few people that I really need to thank. So Sandy Mestry, thank you very much. She did all the roundtables today. Yvette Grenier-Smith and Joe Delaney for sponsorships, and then my deputy, Sonia Twyford. Their support. I need to also thank, more importantly, our sponsors, because without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to have this event today. Their support enables us to provide effective forums for discussing some of the hottest issues in the public sector IT space, in addition to help fund today's charity partner and our chapter's STEM initiatives. Our terawatt sponsors are Citrix, CDWG, Pure Storage, and Cisco. Our gigawatt sponsors, Mad Security and Splunk. Megawatt sponsors, GDIT and vBrick. And Nutanix as our kilowatt sponsor. Our community partners are also listed here in your programs: AFCEA Bethesda, Affirm, Capital Cocktails, GuyTech, and GovTech Works. Let's give a round of applause to our sponsors, please. I'd also like to announce today's charity partner. Each event, we like to take a little bit of our funding and pass it on to a charity, and typically that is a STEM program. But today's partner is the Sandy Hook Promise Foundation, is a national nonprofit organization founded and led by several family members who lost loved ones at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Their mission is to prevent gun-related deaths due to crime, suicide, and accidental discharge. So thank you for our charity partner, and now it is my pleasure to introduce this morning's opening keynote. Mr. William Werkheiser. Mr. Werkheiser received a bachelor's degree in geology from Bloomsburg University and a master's degree in hydrogeology and glacial geology from the University of Massachusetts. He has served in numerous positions since joining the USGS in 1986. Prior to his position as Associate Director for Water, he was the Regional Director for the former USGS Eastern Region. As Deputy Director, Bill Werkheiser is responsible for assisting the Director in USGS and leading the nation's largest water, earth, and biological science and civilian mapping agency. He has over 25 years of experience with USGS and other agencies working on a variety of environmental and scientific issues. Please welcome William Werkheiser.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Guy, for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure to be here and talk with you today and share a little bit about the work we do at USGS and how we're organized and what our mission is. But as I was thinking about today and the audience and what I wanted to say, I was reminded of a story, and the story goes something like this. There's a guy in a balloon, and the wind blows him off course, and he doesn't quite know where he is. So he sees someone on the ground, and he says, "Hey, excuse me, but can you tell me where I am?" And the person on the ground goes, "Well, yeah, you're about 40 feet up and you're in a balloon." And the guy in the balloon goes, "Wow." He goes, "You must be an IT specialist, right?" And they said, "Well, yes, I am, but why do you say that?" "Because the information you gave me was 100% accurate and useless to me." Okay? So the person on the ground says, "You must be a manager." And I go, "I am, but why do you say that?" "Well, you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and somehow that's all my fault." Right? So I am a science manager, so I often don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing, but I have a great staff here to help me negotiate that terrain. And so Paul Exter and Nancy Sternberg, if you could just raise your hands, so they're here from USGS to help us out. So I'm not sure that you're all aware what the US Geological Survey is or what we do. So I thought I'd do a kind of a brief history of the agency, cover 138 years in about 2 minutes. But we are a natural science agency. We have no regulatory or land management responsibility. We are part of the Department of the Interior, and our mission is to provide scientifically defensible information to decision makers both within the department and more broadly across the United States. We have expertise in geology, hydrology, geography, and in biology, and we bring those resources to bear to address the important societal issues of the nation. So we started out 138 years ago, and our mission was pretty basic. It was to classify the public lands of the United States, and primarily from at that time, the West was rapidly expanding through the Louisiana Purchase and the Mexican-American War. And the idea was to explore those lands, describe them for resource potential and for future development. So our second director was John Wesley Powell. He was the first European to successfully navigate the Colorado River. He was a pretty forceful character, and we sometimes think all the things going on in Congress and in politics is kind of a new phenomenon. But in the 1800s, John Wesley Powell said, after his exploration of the West, he said that only about 2% of the land in the West should be developed, that the rest should be dry irrigation and grazing. This didn't go over well with a lot of people, the railroads in particular. They thought the West should be heavily developed and saw it as a huge opportunity. So Congress then defunded the USGS and zeroed out our budget. There for a time we relied on private donations to keep going, and eventually we got reestablished. But just an indication that politics has been around a long time, and political games have been around a long time. It's nothing new. So from that start of kind of classifying the public lands, we've continued to evolve and grow our mission. And I think the way I would describe it is, since almost our inception, we are an information agency. That's our stock in trade. So, in the early days, that information, we'd go out and we'd collect that information, and then we'd bring it back either by horseback or by telegraph. And then through time, the automobile came, and we got more rapid information delivery, and then eventually a telephone, and so even more rapid information delivery. But because of that information delivery systems, we were largely operating in a retrospective analysis. So in other words, we do an awful lot of work in earthquakes and floods. So we could tell you how bad the flood was or how bad the earthquake was. And that's useful for a certain audience, that if your home has just been destroyed, you don't care so much about what happened. You'd like to know what's going to happen and get some advance warning. So in the 80s, with the inception of satellite technology, we were able to deploy sensors across the United States, particularly in our rivers and streams, and we were able to then convey near real-time information on the conditions of the United States, both from a geology perspective or a water perspective. And that changed things considerably. So now agencies that use our information, like the National Weather Service, they could get that information real time and issue their warnings in advance. And it was a big step forward. But again, that was only available to select agencies that were connected to our satellite systems. And then the internet came along in the 90s. And we've created an explosion of information across all sectors of society, but especially for our information within USGS. So now for the first time, someone sitting at home on their computer could have access to our raw data streams. And that has been a huge benefit. And I'll describe in a little more detail about how we've used that technology and grown on that technology to provide service to the nation. And I guess, just a final word on our history here is that where we are now is we categorize our activities into several broad categories. One is observations, understanding, prediction, and then delivery. So in other words, we observe this system, we observe nature. From those observations, we gain an understanding of the physical processes. We do research in those physical processes. And then from that understanding, we're then able to predict what's going to happen. So, for example, now we have a pretty good idea of when a volcano is going to erupt. And we can forecast those eruptions and provide warning to aircraft in the territory so they don't go through an ash cloud. But then the fourth part of that is the delivery of that information. And that's probably the most important part, and that's the reason I'm so happy to be here today, is unless we can get all that great information we have into the hands of the people who need it, people who want it, it doesn't have the value that it should have. So we've focused a lot in recent years onto making more robust delivery systems and giving people what they want when they need it in the form that they need it. And it's an ongoing activity of ours and something that will continue. Now, we are a member of the executive branch, so we report to the event, ultimately to the President of the United States. And every time there's an administration change and priorities change for those administrations. So I just thought I'd give you just a flavor for what our current priorities are and how they affect our information technology. So I don't think it's any secret. Energy is a big issue for this administration, for this country. We do energy assessments. We do mineral assessments. I'll talk more about those in the future. And so that's a critical role for us. You've also probably heard about infrastructure initiatives, the rebuilding of our roads and highways and transportation networks and cities and supporting systems. Much of the information we collect goes to support those activities and support our infrastructure and are used for infrastructure design. And so we look forward to contributing in that area. And then American safety and security. We have a pretty significant hazards presence, both geologic hazards and hydrologic hazards. And we have a big activity in providing advance warning of those hazards as much as we can. American Public Lands, you may be aware the Department of the Interior is the largest landowner in the country. Over 20% of the lands in the United States are owned by the Department of the Interior. And the Department of the Interior has a big role in stewardship of those lands, and we try to provide the departmental agencies the information they need to manage those lands in a wise way. And then you may also have heard that the President has declared that across the federal government there will be a reorganization, and every agency is responsible for putting forward a reorganizational plan. We're not exempt from that mandate. And within the Department of the Interior, the Secretary of the Interior has unveiled the framework of a reorganization, and basically the design of that is to, of the 8 DOI bureaus, is to make that have land management responsibilities is to have that as a single face to the country and to the people, and we're working toward that. So I'll go over some of the activities we're involved in, land, water, and resource stewardship. One of the things that we're heavily involved in is our energy assessments. And we've been doing energy assessments for decades and decades. But the energy assessments change through time. So, for example, with new technologies in drilling, new technologies in recovering of oil and gas, that causes us to revise our estimates of how much is there. So, for example, just this year, we released an assessment of the Wolfcamp Shale. It is in Texas, and it is the largest play of recoverable oil in the United States, newly discovered. We've always known it's there, but now the technology exists to extract that oil and gas. Also, mineral assessments. We have, again, a big role in mineral assessments. One of the things that we're working on right now are critical minerals. Those are those minerals that are needed for many of the devices that you have, cell phones and those kind of things. And unfortunately, some of those minerals, 20 minerals that are required for our standard of living, are not available in the United States. We're 100% dependent on other countries to supply them, and primarily China. So that creates a vulnerability for us. And so one of the things, for example, one of the things we'd like to do is to do a critical mineral assessment across the entire United States. And that has some support, and we hope to be able to do that. And then we have also a big role in geologic hazards. So earthquakes, volcanoes, landslides in particular. And in order to accurately understand those hazards and eventually be able to predict or forecast those hazards, we need detailed mapping. We need mapping, three-dimensional mapping of the geology across the entire United States. A huge effort, but something that we're undertaking. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about our water resource assessments. With the advancements of and technology and IT technology in particular, we're now able to produce high-resolution information on the hydrology and hydrography of the United States. So that's useful for a number of purposes, and one of the purposes it's used to is to predict the impacts of land use changes and changing developmental patterns on our water resources. So with this high-resolution information, we can basically track a particle of water from the time it hits the ground all the way through to the time it goes in the ocean. And we want to provide that to whoever needs it in any form they need it. And then I talked just a little bit about safety and economic growth. One of our initiatives is called 3-Depth, Three-Dimensional Elevation Program, and that is a high-resolution topography. So, traditionally we've had, if you wanted to measure the change in topography across the Washington, D.C. area, you would be able to do that at 5-foot increments. That was the resolution we had. With the advent of LIDAR, that stands for Light Detection and Ranging Systems, remotely sensed systems, we can now get that resolution down into the centimeters. So the idea is to provide that high-resolution topography information to everyone, to make it freely available, and so that you can download it at your leisure. And has a whole range of applications. One of our initiatives is called Smart City Initiative, for example. And, there's an effort to install 5G across many cities. And this high resolution topography can help site those towers for the 5G towers. Likewise, for autonomous vehicles, you need that detailed topography in order to work with those systems and those networks. The other thing I want to mention is Landsat. That's our satellite system. Landsat is a moderate resolution satellite used to measure land cover and land changes on the Earth. It's been around since 1972 and has been improved since then. And the idea with Landsat is that you can get land cover anywhere on the Earth every 8 days. And it's a hugely critical component to many systems. For example, Google downloads it all the time, and it's the basis for their Google Earth and Google Map products. So right now, we've launched Landsat 8, and we're getting ready to launch Landsat 9 in 2020. And each time we do a launch, we try to improve the technology. So one of the things that we launched in Landsat 8 in 2013, I think, was it's called a thermal imager. So it gives a measurement of vegetative state across where it's censoring. So, for example, Gallo Winery uses that to guide the irrigation system of their grapes. And through that technology, they've decreased the cost by 20 to 30% in irrigation and improved the quality of other crops. So just an example of how Landsat is used. Some other things we're working on is something called Shake Alert, and it's an early earthquake warning system. And so when there are earthquakes, we have sensors deployed across the United States. And when shaking occurs, we can get maybe only a 30-second advance notice of when that shaking is going to happen in a particular area. But in that 30 seconds, that allows the surgeon who's doing an operation to stop the operation, allows transit systems to shut down, and allows transmission lines to be shut down. So it's hugely important. It's not cheap, but it's when you consider the benefits, I think it's critical for the nation's security. Other things that we're involved in is flood inundation mapping, so that if you're in the flood-prone area and you get a lot of rain and the rivers start to rise, you as a citizen can go in and click on one of our maps and see how that flooding level ties to where you are and what the projection flooding is going to be, so you can evaluate whether you need to stay or you need to go or you can stay, and how deep that flooding is going to be. So these are all things that we're making available to any user and any citizen. As long as you have access to a computer or a device, you can get that information. And I want to talk a little bit about our partnerships. So we have about 2,000 funding partners in USGS. So we collaborate with many other agencies and even non-governmental organizations in the private sector. And through these collaborations, we're able to leverage each of our resources to gain bigger benefit. And especially in the area of information delivery, those partnerships are critical, and they continue to grow. And we're moving into new areas for us. So as we look at these large integrated systems, so we're going to from kind of the raw data streams. So this is your stream information, stream heights, to integrated modeling systems that require complex algorithms and models to predict or understand what's going to happen. And our effort is to build those kind of integrated modeling systems across the country. So we have national coverage. Those require incredible computing power to operate, and so we're getting more and more involved with high-performance computing, high-throughput computing, in order to run those complex models we have and those huge data sets that we're delivering. The other big area we're moving into as aggressively as we can is cloud computing. We have a huge data. We transmit huge amounts of data. We store huge amounts of data. We see the cloud as a viable solution for working those systems. I will say that I think you have a panel here that's going to include procurement, and the federal procurement regulations are designed to safeguard and ensure that the taxpayers' money is used to the best advantage. So they're very structured, very rigid. And sometimes that good intent is difficult to work with when you're moving into new technologies. And so in particular in cloud computing, we've been trying for several years to move into the arena in a big way. But the cloud environment is ever changing. It requires flexibility. It requires you to make decisions at a moment's notice. And that is not how the federal procurement system works. So we've been working with our acquisitions folks and other acquisition folks, and we made good progress. And I'm hopeful for the future. And we've have a pretty good cloud presence now, and we're just going to build that into the future. So just in closing, I'd just like to say that I thank you for your time and for your attendance here. I'll try to answer any questions I have. If not, me, my experts there. And what I'll say in closing is that throughout my career, the 30-year career I've had in USGS, I've seen the issues that we deal with are becoming more and more complex. They're important issues to society at large. And in dealing with those complex issues, we need the most advanced technology we can get. And whether that technology is in observation sensors or in computing systems or networks or delivery systems, it's a growing field. It's going to continue to grow, and we need those technological advances and breakthroughs to keep us providing the science that society needs to protect them and to maintain their well-being. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Good morning. Thank you for that very informative talk. I'm just curious. I've noticed that FEMA is using more and more crowdsourcing, and I'm wondering if you have made any initiatives in that area.
Yeah, thanks. I should have mentioned that. FEMA has been a leader in that field, especially under Craig Fugate. It was one of his passions, the former director. We have something called Did You Feel It? So when shaking starts, you can go on the website and describe that shaking, and that actually has helped us tremendously in determining the extent of shaking. And in some cases where earthquakes have happened, where we haven't had good sensor coverage, we actually rely on those crowd reports to determine the magnitude and potential damages to the area. So we have something called PAGER. It's the Prompt Assessment for Global Earthquake Response. And when there's an earthquake somewhere, we put out an estimate of what the loss of life might likely be and the economic impact. And a lot of times we rely on those crowdsourced did you feel it reports to help with those estimates. Yeah. In water, we're trying to do something similar, but "Are you wet?" doesn't sound all that compelling. So we have to call it something different.
Yeah. Good morning. The past administration championed open data. I'm wondering about this new administration and their enthusiasm for open data, and how does that change your priorities for opening up not just the raw data but the information feeds, services, and so forth?
Yeah, we have not experienced much any impediment of our open data and our desire to provide more data and more useful information, more discoverable information. The administration so far has been pretty busy trying to get its political appointees in place. For example, in the Department of the Interior, we only have one Senate-confirmed appointee. That's the Secretary of the Interior. So a lot of their effort has been gone into fighting fires that happens in any new administration, getting those learning their jobs. So we've not heard a lot about open data except to continue what we've already gone, and the fact that it's not been shut down at all is encouraging to me. Paul, you may know more about it than I do. Yeah, and we haven't seen any governor on that. Yeah.
Could you describe your cloud initiatives, partnerships in a little more detail in terms of, on-prem, off-prem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say the 30 seconds that it will exhaust my knowledge, then I'll give it over to Paul. But we've had a couple false starts with the cloud initiative. One is within the Department of the Interior. We had a $10 billion contract to provide cloud services. There were parts of that were unworkable for us. So we partnered with NIH, National Institutes of Health, which we think is a more flexible vehicle for us. And we're starting small, and it's in a few $1 million. And then we've been growing it from there as we get more familiar with the cloud and what our needs are and what the capabilities of the cloud are. And especially when we have some security issues and we need to be careful with there. So, and Paul, if you can grab a mic and yeah.
Yeah, so we're currently, USGS currently, as Bill said, using the NIH contract. We're in Amazon Web Services. We've had a commitment to Amazon from the beginning, as many of our USGS locations were using Amazon prior to our cloud initiative. So we fully support Amazon Web Services as the cloud source for USGS. It's an off-premise cloud. While we do have internal clouds, and I'll put them in air quotes, we have a number of data centers in USGS who have internal solutions that are large data solutions, but we don't necessarily call them on-premise clouds, but you could argue that they may fit into that category. But we're totally committed in our cloud initiative to our off-premise cloud solution. Does that answer your question?
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for the keynote this morning. Question is, what are your needs today? What is your biggest problem vis-a-vis cloud technology, et cetera? I know you talked about you'd like to have more advanced technologies, but specifically companies, where can they help?
Well, again, I'll ask Paul or Nancy to chime in here, but one of the concerns we have is we have about 400 locations across the United States. And I'm a little concerned about the performance of our networks across those locations, so that someone sitting in Minot, North Dakota, can have the same performance that someone sitting in our headquarters in Washington, D.C. can have. Our concern there is frankly one of public safety, in that as we transmit a tremendous amount of data across networks. And our folks that are out in the front lines, that are in there measuring streams and measuring floods, they need that information in real time, and any lack of conformance jeopardizes their safety.